Hello and welcome to July's All the Everything. Welcome. And this one is on the topic, which is, I was trying to think of an adjective for this topic, but it's so vast and so deep. I couldn't actually find an adjective that quite did it justice. But it's on the topic of what is your soul's North Star and how to hold your vision. And it's one that I think maybe produced the most I don't usually struggle for adjectives, but each time I go to say them, like, it doesn't quite capture what it is I'm trying to say. Anyway, the conversation and the questions being asked in the pre-show party in the Facebook group just now really showed the importance of this to people, wild ones, on this path. And I would say, particularly people who are here to one way or another be of service in a way that really uses their magical gifts, those old souls, those deep and sensitive people. This particular topic of understanding what our soul's North Star is and then holding and fulfilling our vision. Honestly, I don't know if it gets more important to us than that. And so, as I say, the conversation in the Facebook group really showed that's the case, which I know anyway. I've seen that over and over and again in all the work we do, but it was just, again, another illumination of that. So if you are a deep, wild, sensitive, magical old soul, this will be one of the most important episodes you may have ever listened to. I really mean that. Okay, so let's dive in. What do we mean by soul's North Star? What I would describe it as, and often we'll have this more as a kind of sense of a feeling rather than having something that's particularly visual or all detailed out, but this sense of something that is calling us into individuation, calling us into actualization. It acts just like the idea of North Star is a metaphor that is something here that is above and beyond us, that is calling us towards it. And we feel that call in our body. We feel that call in our awareness whenever we open to it, which I'm going to get into in a moment. And over time, that starts to become clearer and clearer. We start to understand the aspects of that make it up. We can't wait to take action until it's fully clear, because often the working on or walking towards what we've already been shown is required to see more. But again, it's this notion that there is something that we can feel in our hearts that is for us and calls us towards it. So what do I mean then by vision? And again, this is the part that becomes clearer and clearer over time, to the point where we can say, well, the vision and the North Star are one and the same, but that happens over time. That's not something we can kind of, again, just jump to. That vision, simply put, is if we imagine that who we came here to be is fully actualized in all areas of our lives, in the way that we serve, the way that we work, in our relationship, in our environment, in our connection with spirit, all of these different ways is fully actualized. That's the vision. And of course, that's not going to be here embodied, actualized right now. That's the whole point of it being a vision. But that is what it is. It's a end state, in quote marks, recognizing that that end state likely will take the rest of this lifetime. But that's what we mean by vision. And that's what really starts to create the challenges when it comes to holding it. But that's what I'm going to get into a minute. Before I do that, and again, I'm going to focus most of this show talking about that holding, fulfilling. But just before I do that, I'm going to talk briefly about how do we discover that vision in the first place. So we've got this sense of something calling us, this North Star. And then how do we uncover what that looks like in terms of a vision, in terms of this actualization in our lives? There are many ways. And this is something that as a culture, as a modern culture, we have absolutely lost sight of, lost the practices that are as kind of old as humans probably, but thankfully they still exist and they're still there. And so some of the most kind of, I guess, ways that will blow us open and show us a lot at once are things like Vision Quest, things like working with plant teachers. Those are the ones that often will open us up so widely, we get to see a lot of our vision at once. But that's not to say they're the only ways. They are, again, those sort of tried and trusted ways that humans have understood their vision over time. But we don't have to kind of take those like big bites at once. Sometimes like little nibbles are actually more palatable and more digestible. And so being able to just take time out of our normal everyday life and spend time in nature, as you'll know, if you've been around Waking the Wild for any amount of time, we're constantly talking about visiting our trees, visiting our sit spots. These regular practices of nature immersion will show us something. Occasionally we'll suddenly get this kind of big opening and see a lot, but again, even that just regular immersion can really help us inform that vision, which leads me to one of the, I'd say, most accessible practices of all that we invite everyone into whenever they join a Waking the Wild Crucible. It pretty much, certainly for many years, has included right at the start a heart's longing wild wander. So this is a very intentional wander into nature, as wild as is possible, to contemplate what is it that what is it that my heart is longing for? And if you haven't already, you can get our free gift, which is a guide to taking one of those wild wanders, exactly the same as we invite all of our students into. So that, if you haven't already, is a place to start. It is that practice of, and again, it's not something we do just once, but it is one of the most accessible ways to get that kind of like real insight into, this is what my heart longs for. And then if we almost like flip it, it's like my heart longs for this. What would that be like if it was fully actualized? That's the vision. So again, there's many ways of doing this, but those are the primary ways that we can start to uncover our vision. And again, recognize more will be shown. So if, for example, we work with someone over the course of a couple of years, which is fairly common that we'll do that, that first vision that someone distills in the first couple of months of working with us, over time will change, will evolve, not because it was wrong in the first place, just that where they were, they could only see so much. And it required that moving towards that North Star for more to be seen. So again, this is why all of the practices I've mentioned are likely going to be needed to be done over and over and over again, so that we can see more, Okay, so if we go on the idea, and again, if you don't already have clarity on your vision, I would still invite you to listen to the rest of this, because there's so much here that will be very helpful. But definitely, if you haven't already, go take the wild wander after listening to this, and then you can come back and everything else I've spoken to will be really helpful. So, how to hold our vision, which is kind of like, we could do like ... and why it's so hard. because quite frankly, it is probably the most challenging thing we can ever do. Why? Because all of our cultural conditioning, all of our wounding, and all of the lessons and games that our soul came here for are going to show up along the way. That's why. So that's what we're going to be looking at, not just the kind of conditioning wounding, but all of what I've just spoken to. And I've decided I don't normally do these things in these, it's that word beginning of M, mnemogram, I think it's called. I've taken the letters of the word star, and I'm going to talk about the 4 things, the 4 letters of star, to make this as clear as I possibly can, because there's a lot to talk about here. And I wanted, again, make this as clear as possible, because so much of what happens as we're holding, fulfilling our vision looks like it shouldn't be happening that way. It looks like something's going wrong. It looks like we're doing something wrong. And so if I have one intention in this show, it's to shine a light on what's really happening, and many of the places that we think we're doing something wrong actually showing is exactly how it's meant to be. It's just about understanding what's happening, and that in itself can be so helpful. Okay, so starting with the S from star, and star S stands for start, and by that I mean start by devoting to your soul and what it came here for. Sounds really easy, but I have by this point met so many people who are talking about all of these grand visions and grand plans and dreams and comparing themselves and envying others. And nothing can happen unless you choose to start creating your vision, holding your vision and fulfilling it. If we don't start, for obvious reasons, it can never happen. And so this is just by speaking this out. That's probably one of the most powerful things we can do in this lifetime. I remember the time many years ago, I've shared this story before, I had this clear realization the most important thing I could do was devote to living a soul-led life. Really simple. And yet I had a sense of the power in that. And I spoke out to my mentor at the time. And I said, this is what I'm devoting to, living a soul-led life. And that was like casting a magical spell. From that moment I devoted, I was shown so much so quickly. It was my choice to start that's unfolded a journey that's now, many years later, and so many incredible things have happened that I really don't think could have happened if I hadn't made that choice to start. So start, even if you don't know how you could ever fulfill your vision. So again, this is everything I'm talking about is going on the idea you already have a sense of what your vision is. And for many of us, again, particularly magical people, our visions are vast. They are beyond what most people think is sensible or possible. So you're going to have these thoughts come up of, I've no idea how that's possible. How on earth could I create this? If you don't start, of course, you never will. So even if you don't know how, you still need to start. And as I just mentioned, chances are it is going to be run counter to what people around you, whether that's people in your childhood, which is again where our conditioning comes in, will be shown a way of life that looks like that's all that's possible. Growing up, we would have been shown, this is what people can do. This is the kind of jobs that people can do. This is the kind of relationships that people can have. Our vision will take us beyond that. It will take us beyond that. And again, likelihood is we would have continued to surround ourselves with some people that are still repeating those same things. This is all that's possible. This is all that's sensible. if you listen to those things and allow them to stop you, you will never be able to feel your vision. You have to start, even though people around you and your old conditioning says it isn't sensible or possible. The only way we can do this is by starting walking towards our North Star. And S could also be for sacred. And this is something that I think is a really helpful reminder, because when we're caught up in all of the noise, all of the challenges, all of the inconveniences of holding our vision, it's really helpful to come back to remembering it is sacred. This is what we came here for. This is our unique expression of spirit. If we can remember that and hold it as sacred, something that we are so blessed to have, so blessed to know, let alone have that opportunity to live into, it brings with it a grace that without being able to hold it as sacred is lacking. If without that sense of this is sacred, we will be victims to it, we'll be resentful. It's really helpful to come back to that knowing of like, my vision is sacred. Okay, now that flows on really nicely to T. So T in STAR stands for trigger. So as I said before, holding and moving towards our vision will trigger all of our wounds. It will create huge resistance, and it will definitely go against much of our conditioning if we are doing it right. So none of those things are things to avoid. If we are truly holding and fulfilling our vision, it will create all of that triggering. It will. It will. There's no way around that. It's meant to be that way. And knowing that is so helpful, because what I hear over and over and over again from people is all of these things are happening that are painful and are really difficult and are kind of like show me that perhaps I'm doing the wrong thing. We can hold that as I must be doing something wrong. Either my vision isn't actually my vision, or I must be doing something wrong in the way that I'm holding and moving towards it. No, it is absolutely perfect that that's happening. And I know it feels anything but perfect. And I know it's frustrating probably hearing me say this, but, and I will come back to this when I come to letter R, it has to do this. It has to move you into all of your wounds in order for it to truly be your soul's vision. So just to know that is really helpful. Again, it allows us to hold whatever's happening in a way where we're like, okay, of course, this is going to be challenging. This is going to trigger my wounds. Recognizing that really changes everything. And of course, that means we are then including doing the healing work as part of fulfilling our vision. We recognize holding, fulfilling our vision is also recognizing the healing that needs to take place and devoting to that. The things are not separate. They become part of that fulfilling our vision. So again, really important to know there is no way to avoid the healing work if we want to truly fulfill our vision. And again, this is where seeing that what we're doing is so beyond our modern culture's ideas of what's like a successful life to live, or a life that is, you know, filled with ease and kind of fits really neatly into the grooves of our cultural expectations. Recognizing it's not going to do those things is, again, really helpful, because it allows us to hold ourselves steady when we really are running counter to those things. We start to realize the ways that we're using cultural ideas of things should go a certain way and they should take a certain time. we can recognize like this isn't like a normal project. I mentioned in the pre-show party in the Facebook group that I've had 3 months now of building work in my house and or garden. And it's finally coming to an end this Friday. And it's been really helpful to know what I know in terms of holding the vision of the completed work, and to keep coming back to that with all the different challenges that have arisen, the problems that have arisen, the times where there's been big delays and extra costs and all of those things, and also just to kind of like hold myself through the times where it's actually been really inconvenient. There was one time where I was recording, I was either on a client call or I was recording something, and I had a builder drilling a big hole, like this size hole. If you're listening on the podcast and can't see, I'm holding my fingers up about the size of an orange. Drilling a hole of that size, literally about 1.5 meters away from me outside my window, and managed to just about cope with it with my mic. It's got a very directional mic, thankfully, headphones in, but it has been super challenging. And so knowing all these things I know has been really helpful to, again, hold that vision and move towards it and not really get too like dragged down into all of that frustration. And what's really important to recognize is that's a very simple, in contrast, project. Understanding like that does have like a set of timings and costs, and therefore expectations of, there may well be things that go wrong, there might be new things that come in, but I do have a sort of sense of like, this is how it should go. When it comes to holding and fulfilling our soul's vision, just throw all of that out of the window. It's going to get in the way if we're measuring our progress by this just completely made up set of ideas. It likely will take you your whole lifetime to fulfill your vision if you are walking towards it. Of course, if you're not even choosing it, it's not going to happen at all in this lifetime. But even if you are deeply, deeply devoted, it will take you your whole lifetime. And it's going to happen in ways that you could not have at all predicted. Even those of us that have the most foresight, things are going to happen. Spirit's going to intervene in ways we just would not know. And so to try to measure how we're doing our progress using kind of like mundane modern world metrics just won't serve us. All we can do is measure, are we really devoted? Am I really taking the aligned actions, which is what I'm about to get to into a minute? That's all we can know. It's all we can know. That's not to say, again, there can be sort of like smaller creations within that we might well be able to bring the similar kind of measures as I have in terms of my building project. But overall, when we're looking at the fulfillment of our soul's vision, it is just going to hamstring us to try to expect it to go a certain way and then make ourselves or the world wrong when it doesn't go that way. Is there anything else to say on that before I move on to A? So one final thing to add. As I say, in order for us to fulfill and hold our soul's vision, we have to do the healing work. It's part of holding and fulfilling our vision. And part of that, which we're really getting into at the moment in Wild Sovereign, is recognizing without that embodiment of the sovereign and without the sovereign meeting the child, is probably not really healing work. And it probably also won't really allow us to hold the vision. Both those archetypes, the sovereign and the child, and really I'd say the wild sovereign and the child, are essential. So just want to add that. We don't have time to really go deep in there, but it feels as though it's so important for me to say that, because without those two archetypes, very consciously part of our work, I can't see how it'd be possible to fulfill our vision. So again, absolutely essential. And one final thing also is going back to that idea of like, we will have these kind of very human, modern human ideas of like, I should be here, looking around, comparing ourselves. That's going to happen. My invitation to all of you, particularly if you've got some kind of sort of public face to your work, recognize that pressure to pretend that we're further along than we actually are, particularly if we have shared in one way or another aspects of our vision. Really important to be honest with ourselves and others. It doesn't mean you have to share everything, but certainly being very honest and not kind of trying to pretend that our vision is already fulfilled. If we're creating this public image that is like already what our vision is, that's just not allowing us to really be in that space where magic happens, where we're really open and humble and allowing things to be created. That if we're holding rigidly into this, like, this is what it would look like if I had actualized my vision, am I going to kind of like project that out there as if I'm already there? You can feel like the rigidity of that isn't allowing for things to actually be created. So it's so important that we're really honest, again, where we are. And again, doesn't mean we have to share all the ins and outs of everything that's going on with us for the outside world, but be honest with what we do share. Okay, coming to A, aligned action. Simply taking the next aligned action that is shown to us. And this again goes back to the regular nature immersion will show us certainly our vision, but it also share often the next aligned action to take to fulfill that vision. And again, without those pauses, without that time in nature, we likely will be lost in this kind of a much more conditioned, whether it be our own thoughts, whether it be stuff that we're seeing from social media, whether it be other people saying to us, like, have you thought of this? Oh, I'm now using whatever it might be, TikTok or Threads. Have you thought about this? And it can really appear that these are aligned actions. They can seem as though, oh my goodness, all these things are coming at me. Perhaps this is aligned action. It's not to say those aligned actions aren't ever going to show up in those ways. I would say they're the rarity. The aligned actions that I can most look back on and say that absolutely was aligned for me and I acted on it, and then I can see that unfolded into something powerful. I'm struggling to think of ones that came in those ways that I described. Almost all of them came. Sometimes that I'm going to add something in a moment, actually. Sometimes there was a kind of confirmation, but they came first from things like my dreams. So dream work is another really good way that we can understand what we're being called to. Time in nature, and again, often extended time, as I'm sure you'll know if you've been listening to the show for a while. Over the last few years, I've had extended time in nature, whether that be sitting out ceremonies, whether that be time just wild wandering for extended periods. All of those times have shown me something so important about what's next for me to do. And again, sometimes after I've been shown the next aligned action to take, it is mirrored in some way. And this is often what we'll call synchronicity. It's mirrored by some way in the material world. So it could be after I've been shown something, the opportunity that kind of allows me to take the action is presented in some way or other. But I say it's rare that that's the first place it's come from. So I'll give an example of this. Many years ago now, I was in the bath, which is also for me another way that I kind of have that immersion literally in water, but also kind of like an immersion into my soul. And I had this realization that it was time for me to run an offering specifically for women to reclaim the wild feminine. So I had this just very clear, like, that's the next aligned action for me to take. An hour afterwards, one of our long-term clients messaged me and said, if you do a circle for women reclaiming the feminine, she may not word it in that way, but basically saying that, I'm in. So that happened an hour after I had this realization. And so it didn't come from her. She validated what was already coming through me. And that typically is how these things will interact. But if we're taking our lead from what we're consuming out there or what we're kind of just been bombarded with, it's very unlikely to be an aligned action. Because when we're talking, also just to say, when we talk about aligned action, it's soul aligned action. That's the meaning of aligned, is an alignment with our souls. And how will we know that? Spending time with our souls. Okay, let me just see what else to say on aligned action. So when we have been shown that next aligned action to take, of course, the next thing to do is to take it. That will often be the most challenging part of all. It means taking the aligned action, even if it feels like the thing we least want to do. Even if it's going to cost us in ways that feel beyond reasonable. And again, that's not to say, I'm not saying we should. I'm saying that if we want to fulfill our vision, that's what's required. And again, that's often where the healing work will need to come in. I've shared by now many times, like the most obvious example of this for me was when I had very clear signs 4 years ago or so now, where it was time for me to devote much more deeply and intentionally to the shamanic path. I really did not want to do that. Really did not want to do that. And yet I knew it was the next aligned action to take. And I did the work I needed to do to be able to choose it. I didn't try to deny it was the aligned action. I didn't try to like force myself into it anyway. I did what was needed so I could choose to take that aligned action. Sometimes the next aligned action to take is quite counterintuitive. Sometimes the next aligned action to take is to pause. That's probably the one that is most challenging in today's modern world. Again, particularly for people who are, I don't know, entrepreneurs of some description, business owners. We can have this sense of like, kind of like, go, 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 look around at other people, compare ourselves, like notice what we might need to bring in terms of money. So all very understandable things. And then really bypass the fact that without pausing, we aren't going to get the next aligned action, because again, they happen one after another. Often one aligned action will lead to the next one. We only get shown the next one when we take the first one. So if we're being shown the thing to do right now is pause, we won't get to see the next aligned action until we do. Likewise, sometimes the next aligned action to take doesn't really look like it's going in the direction of our North Star. It could be that we seem to need to go kind of somehow sideways or even backwards. But this is where, again, having this sense of this being a North Star is above us, it shines down on us. Even if we're walking away rather than directly, we're not really, because a North Star shines in a way that we are always in its beacon. We're always in its beam, rather. It's always a beacon that we can just look up. And that requires us to know it's always there. When it seems as though it's no longer ahead of us because we've been called in another direction, recognizing we can look up and it still will be there. We don't need to always be going directly towards it, as long as, again, it is an aligned action to go in a way that's not obviously going towards it. Is that everything on aligned action? Let me just ponder. So just for the show, Sarah was talking about doing things differently to status quo, particularly for people in the coaching industry, and particularly when it comes to sharing your message and being of service and making a living. And the challenges of that when that may not fit into the modern world. So this goes back to what I was saying again about the ways our conditioning and wounding will always be triggered in the holding and fulfilling of our vision. So often, again, that next aligned action to take may well run very counter to what is expected, what is normal, what is approved of. And so again, it may just take work. I say just, this is the work. It's going to take that work of doing the healing work, freeing ourselves from those bounds of I need to fit into what other people think's normal in order to take that next aligned action. Okay, just see if there's anything else before I move on. No, I think I'll now move on to R. And R is for reclaim. So all of this, all of what I've been speaking about is actually about reclaiming all parts of our soul and being who we came here to be. So important to recognize that, because again, we can get so hung up on this being about what, say, for example, your vision involves creating a successful business which makes lots of money. It may do. Visions can include all sorts of things. You know, I don't have a view on whether or not they're kind of, you know, worthy or true or correct. You'll know, your soul will know. So whatever that thing is, it's very easy to start to then hold that as being kind of like the important part. You know, if I'm not therefore creating a successful business and making a lot of money, you know, anything but that is a failure. Anything but that is not really what I came here for. This is why it's so important to recognize all of this is a reclamation. If you are moving towards your vision, if you are doing the healing work, which a lot of the time, the healing work is a direct reclamation of your soul, then that's what you came here for. That's what you came here for. And trust that that is everything. If you are doing that, there isn't anything you could be doing that's worth more. And again, remember, this will infuse every area of your life. So it can sometimes sound, again, when we're talking about this idea of soul vision, we can equate this to like the job we do. This is the full expression of your soul in all parts, in your relationships, in your parenting, in any way that you can show up, any type of relationship. So it doesn't get more important than that. And on that note, again, when we're talking about our North Star is actually our soul. Us moving towards it is us moving towards union with our soul. That's the prize. We were talking about rainbows in the pre-show party. That is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The star is us. It's not some idea. It's not something outside of us. It's actually moving closer and closer and closer towards ourselves, our own souls. Okay, I'm just going to, how am I doing for time? I've got a bit longer. I had some really good questions asked in the pre-show party. So some of them I've weaved in so far. I'm just going to see if there's any particular ones that feel important to talk to directly before we close. So Janet spoke about, can you talk about the dreaming of vision into being? I know there needs to be aligned actions, but I feel I get stuck about believing the vision. So this is a really, really great question. So I have spoken a bit about this, but there is definitely almost a muscle that we need to bring into being. That is that like holding itself. I've spoken a lot about kind of really allowing yourself to trust it's for you, start. But there is definitely something, and a lot of the work we do in Wake and Wild Crucibles, where we support people to create a decree, which includes someone's sacred vision, to speak it out every morning, to feel the energy of it. The more we do that, and again, we have to at some point put aside other people's ideas of what's possible, what's sensible, really allow ourselves, even if it's only for a period of the day, initially, to feel that energy of our vision fulfilled. Everything in our vision fully brought to life. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Trust that is for you because it is you. Over time, that muscle of holding that, seeing it, feeling it, starts to do the work for us. So it's not to say, again, there aren't going to be times that we're going to be tested on that. But if we have, in between those times of the greatest challenges, really allowed us that kind of regular training effect of like, this is what it feels like for my vision to be actualized, that's something that we can evoke more and more easily at times where it's most challenging. There was another question that I wanted to talk about, which may seem slightly tangential, but the reason this is a really important one is because I feel this is going to be relevant actually to almost all of you listening. So Kelly asked a great question, which is, I wonder if you might speak more to the confusion, resentment, and bitterness post you made the other day, and the frustration and patience when one wants to be in service of their gifts, especially as a projector. And this was a post I wrote a few days ago about if we're not playing our unique role in a community, and how it will then often show up in resentment and bitterness. For many of you listening to this, you are here to serve in a way that isn't typical for this modern culture. Many of people who are drawn to Wake in the Wild are the people who in an ancient culture would have been described as the shaman, as the medicine man, as the medicine woman. That's not to say that's exactly the job you're doing today, you will be doing today, are doing today, are meant to be doing. It's not to say you'd necessarily describe yourself that way, but your gifts are very aligned with those kinds of gifts. Often you will be more open than most people, more sensitive, able to see and feel things that others can't. The challenge is, in today's world, whereas in a more natural human setting, we would all have a community around us, and then we would be naturally there serving that community. In the modern setting, very few of us have anything remotely like true community. Almost none of us. So as those people, as these open, sensitive, deep, magically gifted people, we are going to have to recognize that without one way or another creating and being part of a community, we are not going to be able to serve. The shaman doesn't exist without the community. And again, I'm using the word shaman really as a shorthand, as a metaphor. You don't have to be a shaman, you don't have to call yourself a shaman, but recognize this at an archetypal level. Without a community, there is no one for you to serve. So recognizing that's where we are. We chose to come here as souls now, knowing this will be the case. It is hard. I'm not saying this as in, therefore it's easy, go off and create your community. I'm saying this is the reality of things right now. Until we recognize that we have to create, be part of a community, we won't get to be able to be fully actualized. We will not get to serve our medicine. We will not get to fulfill our vision. So that part is essential. And of course, within that, us showing up fully as who we are, as someone who can serve the community, is not like a step A and step B. Like, clearly these are one and the same thing, but both are essential. In an ancient setting, would be part of a community, and the community would know us as that medicine man or woman. Today, we have to, one way or another, create, be part of a community, and simultaneously show that we are the person that can serve. So again, this might seem slightly tangential to this topic of hold and fulfilling the vision. My sense is most of you listening, what I've just said applies to you and applies to your North Star and applies to your vision. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else. I want to... So this is, I've certainly spoken to this in various ways throughout, but I'm just going to end with something that Sarah asked. If it's your North Star, does it mean it will materialize in this lifetime? So I'm only conscious of this particular lifetime that I've lived. But I'm going to speak from things that I've been shown that inform something that's kind of like beyond me being able to be at the end of my lifetime and speaking back from that place. My sense is that we are shown what we need to do to fulfill what we came here for in this lifetime. In order for us to have a sense of that North Star, to have a sense of the vision, it means it's for this lifetime. It's specifically what our soul came here for in this lifetime. So we're not being shown something that's beyond it, because it would be irrelevant. We are being shown very clearly, this is what I came here for in this lifetime. And of course, it can only happen if we do all of the things I've been talking about in this episode. It's not going to be thrust upon us. We have absolute agency, both in the choosing to come here, with that being what we get to live out, play with, learn from this lifetime, and we get absolute agency in whether we actually choose it or not. And so it can materialize in this lifetime. Whether it will is dependent on whether we move towards that North Star or not. My hope is, having listened to everything I've shared with you today, you are in the best position you can be to do so. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to share. And if you've listened and you've got questions come up for you, do please share in the Facebook group. One way or another, we will make sure that we come back to you, whether it be in a future episode or directly in the group. So this is, again, a vast topic. And so there may be questions that come up that you would like to ask. Okay, what next? What might be the next aligned action for you to take? So firstly, as I mentioned, I think earlier, we're currently running the live circle for Wild Sovereign. We're, I think, on week 4. After we finish this one, we will be creating a way that people can join at any time is aligned for them. So it will be a 6-week mystical journey that you can do at your own pace. I mean, we'd advise you do it in the 6 weeks, but you know, you've got it for as long as you need to have it, and can go back and listen to the material. We're aiming to have that available in the next couple of months. So if you want to register your interest for when that comes out, you can do so at wakingthewild.com/sovereign. And if you haven't already, taken the wild wander to uncover your heart's deepest longings, you can do so at wakingthewild.com/wolfpack. Anything else that you are interested in on all things Waking the Wild can be found at wakingthewild.com. And in particular, if you go to our Go Deeper page, it will show at any point whatever we've got coming up or is available now. If you're listening to this on the podcast and you're not a member of our Facebook group, I would so recommend you come join us and be part of our beautiful community. And you can join me for the pre-show party next month. And that is at facebook.com/groups/waking the wild. I think that's everything for this month. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you've joined me live for the pre-show party, whether you're catching up with this on the podcast or on YouTube. Thank you. I so appreciate you, and so much love for your day. Mwah. Goodbye.